Today, I want to talk about 5 ways that alcohol can kill you. This is directly related to the toxic effects of alcohol, so I'm not going to talk about, increased risks of accidents and stuff, the silly things that people do when they are drunk. This is 5 ways that alcohol attacks and poisons your body and can lead to directly alcohol-related deaths. About 200,000 Americans die every year from alcohol-related causes, and about 3 million people worldwide die every year from alcohol. So, this is a very serious issue, and I want to just kind of dive right into it here. So, item number one on my list is acute alcohol poisoning. In the United States, every year, about 2,500 people die from alcohol poisoning, from acute alcohol poisoning. So this is about 6 or 7 people per day that pass away from just drinking too much alcohol on a specific occasion. This occurs when we drink way more alcohol than our body is prepared to process, and it accumulates in our central nervous system. So, a couple of interesting things about this. So, the reason why people die from acute alcohol poisoning is alcohol suppresses our central nervous system function. And once a person passes out, like this is a big warning sign, okay? Somebody passes out, we don't know if they will progress to acute alcohol poisoning death. And the reason for that is at that point, their central nervous system is depressed enough that they can't remain conscious. And then the next thing that would happen after that is that their brainstem would be suppressed enough that it can't function enough to make sure that they are able to continue breathing. So asphyxiation is the main cause of death from acute alcohol poisoning because the brainstem does not allow them to continue breathing. Another point about this is once a person passes out, the alcohol that's still in their stomach, that's still floating around in their bloodstream and whatnot, that hasn't reached their brain, that is still continuing to be absorbed. So like when a person passes out, be concerned. See if you can wake them up. If they can't remain conscious, um, call someone. Seriously, call 911, get help because the next thing could be that suppression of the brainstem, and you can't resolve that on your own. So definitely passing out, big red flag. Also with this, an interesting thing is that the body temperature can be lowered due to this central nervous system depression, and you can get hypothermia, which can also affect heart function. So people can have they can have depressed function of their brainstem and hypothermia, and then the heart doesn't function correctly. So they can also have heart failure, heart attack at this point as well. So acute alcohol poisoning, number one on the list, it can happen to anybody. This is the one that you hear about in the news and stuff, like hazing incidents at universities and in the military and stuff where, young people who are not prepared for it are forced to drink too much alcohol at one time, or like during parties and stuff, like people are, playing drinking games and whatnot, and they just aren't prepared for that acute danger of too much alcohol consumption. So the system's overwhelmed, unexpected death. The next item on my list is liver failure. I'm just going to say just really quickly here, this for me is close to home. This is the mechanism. This is the way that my little brother passed away. So this is close to home. Um, you've heard about liver failure with alcohol for almost for certain. There's lots of reasons that people get liver failure. I mean, there's diseases and other exposures that can cause liver failure, but alcohol is a big one. And for some reason, and this isn't well understood, it doesn't affect everybody who drinks heavily. So certain people who drink heavily end up with liver failure. It starts off as what's called a fatty liver, and this is when you start to get a certain amount of dysregulated function in the liver. All right, let's talk about what the fatty liver is. Our livers break down toxins, and our liver produces what's called smooth endoplasmic reticulum. This is a structure inside the cells in the liver that breaks down alcohol and other toxins into safer components. And that structure contains a lot of fat. And as The liver tries to produce more and more of that. The production of fat gets thrown off in the liver as well. And so the liver, it gets enlarged with extra fat and it becomes not as functional in the breakdown of toxins, including alcohol. And you get what's called a fatty liver. So initially, this can just result in kind of common liver dysfunction symptoms, which is fatigue, abdominal discomfort. You might see some jaundice with a fatty liver, you might not. Um, and honestly, a fatty liver might not even be detected. Like you just might think you're just a little sick or whatever. Uh, it can lead to some things like higher blood pressure and cholesterol as well, the fatty liver. So that's just something to think about. Um, Fatty liver that can then progress to what's called alcohol-associated hepatitis. So hepatic system is things related to the liver. Hepatic means liver, basically. And itis is inflammation. So hepatitis is inflammation of the liver. Alcohol-associated hepatitis, alcohol-associated inflammation of the liver. At this stage, you have certain amount of cell death in the liver. The liver is no longer functioning the way that it should, and it's at risk. You can still turn things around at this point. You'll have some scarring in the liver. You'll have some, you'll have the inflammation, but parts of the liver are still functional at least. And the liver does a really good job of recovering if you remove the source of the problem, in this case, alcohol. So you'll still have the symptoms of fatigue and abdominal pain. You're much more likely to see the jaundice and the other things like, the cholesterol and blood pressure and whatnot. So then from there, we progress to what's called cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is scarring of the liver, and it's pretty much liver failure at this point. Um, Most of the liver at this stage is not functioning. It's not functioning correctly. Uh, Depending on how advanced it is, it's very hard to come back from cirrhosis because your liver is pretty much dead, at least in most places. And here, the liver produces a lot of waste fluid that can't be expelled at this stage. So people need to have fluid drained. There's extra bleeding and stuff that occurs internally that has to be dealt with. There's a lot of pain with this. It's very uncomfortable. You'll definitely see the jaundice and such. At this stage, if you can quit drinking and you can be treated like that fluid can be drained, they can keep, your toxins in your blood and stuff managed for several months. The only way to get past this is to survive long enough to qualify for a liver transplant. And the way that the medical system works is that organ transplants are not given to people who they don't think will be able to successfully take care of that organ. And this is because of respecting the gift of organ donation. So they don't want to take a liver from somebody that could go to, say, somebody who had hepatitis through no fault of their own and give it to somebody who has a poor record of taking care of themselves and managing their alcohol intake. So it can be tough to get a liver transplant if you are a severe alcoholic, if you can even survive that long. So again, this doesn't happen to everybody who drinks heavily. It's just one of the ways that you can die, and it's really unpleasant. I unfortunately have seen it happen. Another one that happens too is the risk of heart attack and stroke. So, alcohol has a broad effect on the cardiovascular system. Also, alcohol comes with a lot of empty calories. So, you see a lot of people, especially people who drink lighter forms of alcohol, who drink lots and lots of alcohol, there's just tons of sugars and stuff in there. So it elevates your triglycerides, it increases your cholesterol, and it makes people overweight. Like you gain people get very obese drinking heavily for a long time. And that alcohol, that obesity and those other factors, they put a lot of strain on your heart. They damage your blood vessels. They cause narrowing of the blood vessels, hardening of the blood vessels, and you basically are at much higher risk of fatal strokes and heart attacks. And this happens in very young people. I've met people in their 20s who They just love to drink beer, they buy cheap cases of beer. They're overweight. And I've met people who have had more than one heart attack in their 20s just from, the side effects of drinking too much alcohol. So, number three on this list is definitely heart attacks and strokes due to overconsumption of alcohol. And it doesn't have to be decades of overconsumption. Like you're going to find like the liver disease, that takes a long time to develop. But the heart attacks and strokes, maybe a couple years, a few years of heavy drinking, you can have a heart attack. So just something to be aware of. The next one on this list is withdrawal. So when people quit drinking, either short term or long term, so alcohol withdrawal is sort of surprising as far as its lethality. The good news is that this has improved, but no one who wants to quit drinking, who's been drinking heavily for a long period of time, should do this without at least consulting with a physician. And the reason for this is a long period of heavy drinking can cause withdrawal that sort of sneaks up on you. This is also one that doesn't happen to everybody, and it is different for everybody. For some reason, there's just individual differences that some people experience this far worse than others, and it isn't exactly tied to how much you drink. So let's talk about this for a little bit. Um, in mild cases and in short-term cases, let's say somebody is a heavy drinker and they don't drink for a day. Within a day, you can experience symptoms like headache, nausea, maybe you'll even experience a fever and some sweating and whatnot, and maybe even a little bit of a tremor. You can see those kinds of things. But uh, let's say you're not really quitting drinking, you plan on drinking more later, you just didn't drink that day. A lot of these people will just have another drink or two, like, oh, that'll take care of it, a couple drinks, and those symptoms do go away. That's because it's putting back the expectation that their brain has that alcohol will be there to perform the function that it's come to expect in the brain. And we'll talk about that in a second. So, um, short-term withdrawal, mild withdrawal. It's uncomfortable, but it's not a big deal. Then we get to this next stage of withdrawal, which is more moderate withdrawal. And same sorts of things, you have the headache, you have maybe, like I said, nausea, some shaking maybe of your hands or whatever. Start to get like hallucinations. Auditory hallucinations are not usually part of this. So if you have auditory hallucinations, those are associated with other things like maybe schizophrenia, think schizophrenia. But for some reason, with alcohol withdrawal, you get visual hallucinations and tactile hallucinations. So you'll have funny feelings in your hands and feet. Your sensory modalities are altered, basically, and that's a more moderate stage. Here's what I want to talk about with withdrawal. So, chronic alcohol consumption leads to an increase in GABA signaling in the brain. We have fewer GABA receptors by a lot than we have of glutamate receptors, but GABA is our inhibitory signal, and alcohol increases how active that signal is in our brain. And the other signal that we have is glutamate, excitatory signals, which I'm going to describe here, glutamate. So glutamate is actually suppressed by alcohol. So regular consumption of alcohol increases this signal to slow down the central nervous system. So now I'm saying like the whole central nervous system is slowed down because the inhibitory signal, the slow down signal has been increased and the excitatory signal has been decreased. So everything just slows down, right? In order to keep functioning on a day-to-day basis, the brain sort of overregulates the amount of glutamate receptors. Those excitatory receptors in the brain are increased just to keep us functioning, on a day-to-day basis. So you can still learn, you can still get through your day and everything, but you have to do it with alcohol, because that's what you've trained your brain to do. So when we remove the alcohol, we had that increased GABA signaling. Now that's going to come down, And then the brain tried to push back on that increased GABA signaling by increasing the amount of signaling of glutamate through excess glutamate release and excess glutamate receptors. And now it's not being regulated down by the GABA receptors, but it's now set free. So now we get this jump in excitatory signals. Here's the danger. When we get this global jump in excitatory signaling in the brain, that can cause seizures. Seizures are unregulated excitatory activity in the brain. And if you have a seizure disorder, it's usually starting at like a damaged point in your brain. But with alcohol, you've done this globally to your brain. So you get like this massive surge of excitatory activity in your brain. And this causes a lot of the really negative symptoms of alcohol withdrawal, especially the most severe forms. And the seizures themselves can be fatal. Um, Seizures can disrupt breathing and heart function like instantly. So that is a big factor. A way that this is treated, by the way, is that we give benzodiazepines to people who are experiencing severe withdrawal. This is done in the clinic. It's usually titrated up to basically push down. It basically increases the GABA signaling. So benzodiazepines increase our GABA signaling, which then pushes down that unregulated thing, similar but in a controlled manner to what the alcohol has done. And then we keep the benzodiazepines in place. We kind of titrate them down until the body has a chance to achieve a new equilibrium. So without treatment in the clinic, without treatment, this is usually done in the emergency room, then you have about a 50% chance of dying if you progress to the stage of delirium tremens, which is where seizures are happening more commonly. And with treatment, you have a better than 90% chance of survival. So it's still not great. Like there's still like a 10% chance you'll die, but that's better than 50% chance. So again, if you're gonna quit drinking, if you've been drinking heavily, you don't know where you're gonna land on the withdrawal spectrum. So definitely don't try to do this on your own. If you start to have any withdrawal symptoms and you're trying to quit drinking, you don't want to go back and have that next drink. Please don't have that next drink. Go to the ER, go to the doctor, and let them know what's going on with you and get help. Uh, Delirium tremens, just a little bit more about that because I didn't say a lot on that. That is sort of like end stage of this. The big difference between that and the more severe um, symptoms that I already discussed is that you get altered consciousness. So people will drift in and out of consciousness during this. The seizures will become more common. Um, Delirium is the altered consciousness in and out of consciousness, and tremens is seizures. So yes, that's that. So that's number four on my list. Withdrawal, very scary, dangerous thing. Um, I've definitely known one person who has experienced this for sure, maybe more, but one person who definitely experienced kind of that middle stage, and it was a very scary experience. So uh, be aware. And then the last item on my list here is one that people don't think about. So this isn't a brain related thing. It's not a liver related thing. It's cancer. So I had mentioned before that in the liver, alcohol is broken down into two. It's broken down from ethanol, which is itself a toxin, a cellular toxin, especially neurotoxic and toxic in the liver. Um, but it gets broken down into something called acetaldehyde. And aldehydes are chemically reactive compounds. Acetaldehyde is very small. It can get in and out of cells pretty much as easily as water. Same as alcohol, by the way. Alcohol can pass in and out of cells pretty much as easily as water. And acetaldehyde can get into the nucleus of the cells and it interacts directly with DNA and causes little damage points in the DNA, little breaks in the DNA that the cells then have to figure out how to repair. A lot of times that might involve removing a base or a base gets misreplaced. Something goes wrong in the repair mechanism and you get DNA damage. And over time, this accumulates. And of course, DNA damage is pretty much the key mechanism of cancers. So, alcohol produces a very potent carcinogen in acetaldehyde, and it increases the risk of 7 different cancers. Most of these are cancers along the digestive tract, so think um, mouth, throat, esophagus, stomach, colon, those kinds of cancers. And then it also increases the chance of breast cancers. And this is breast cancers in men and women. It affects the tissues that that are involved in breast cancer. So, um, yeah, it's a mechanism people don't think of with cancer. And because of this particular mechanism, in 2023, the World Health Organization came out with a statement that there is no safe level of alcohol consumption. And they were specifically talking about the fact that any DNA damage from this increases your risk of cancer. Therefore, alcohol is unsafe. And alcohol is poisonous. Ethanol itself, the alcohol that we consume, ethanol is poisonous. So that's my list of 5 things that can kill you with alcohol. And if you don't drink, just consider not drinking ever. It's There are plenty of other ways to enjoy your life. If you do drink and you don't drink regularly, if you are a moderate drinker, um, I don't want to say that drinking is evil. It's, you know, something that perfectly normal, good people do. If you're drinking all the time, it increases your risks of all of these things that I just discussed. But it's okay to have the occasional drink. There's no evidence that most of these things will happen to you, if you have a drink, a couple times a month, or if you have a couple of drinks here or there. But if you're drinking regularly, if you're drinking even like a drink a day, 7 days a week, some of these things, like think that cancer risk, for example, are definitely going to increase. And I think I'll just leave that today for this video. I have some other videos on other alcohol related topics if you are interested in any of that. I definitely would encourage you and ask you to check some of those out. I would like to keep making these videos. If you are interested in this type of content, please like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if there are any topics that you would like me to discuss. I'm kind of trying to go between my own personal experience. I've had some experience living with people who drink and having family members who have had some very adverse effects with alcohol. So I'm kind of trying to mix myself between that and the science and whatnot because I am a PhD neuroscientist and I have both academic and personal interest in this topic. So again, if you like this content, like and subscribe to my channel. Please leave me a comment. The interactions are very helpful for me, and I'd like to build this channel. So thank you very much for your time, and best of luck, and take care.